Why is it that you're the first one in and the last one out, yet you're still falling behind? You're pouring your entire soul into the grind, skipping sleep and sacrificing your sanity every single day. It feels like a cruel joke when the hardest workers, people like you, are the ones struggling most just to keep their heads above water. You're clocking 12-hour days, while others seem to glide towards success in just 6. But here is the cold, hard truth you haven't realized yet. You aren't just tired, you are carrying a weight that was never meant for your shoulder. You're trading your health for progress, but you're stuck on a treadmill while the world flies past you. This massive effort you're making, it's creating a gap between your hard work and your stagnant results that is becoming impossible to ignore. And if you don't find the hidden reason behind this struggle soon, you won't just miss your dreams, you'll hit a total irreversible burnout. Your dedication is actually your biggest trap, but there is a way out, a secret shift in perspective that changes everything without requiring a single extra drop of sweat. Today, we stop the bleeding and save your future. To understand how to break free, you first need to see the invisible injustice that is draining your bank account and your spirit. And it all starts with the story of a man who thought sweat was the only way to win. Ever wonder why the guy busting his tail day and night still can't catch a break? It's a bitter pill to swallow when your bank account doesn't match your sweat equity. You're putting in the hours, skipping sleep, and basically living on caffeine and grit. Yet, for some reason, the finish line keeps moving further away while you're running. It feels like you're running a championship race on a high-speed treadmill, doesn't it? You're giving it your all, but the scenery never changes because you are unknowingly carrying the weight of expectations and tasks that aren't even yours to bear. It's not that you're lazy. Honestly, you're probably outworking everyone in your circle right now. But effort alone is a deceptive master that often leaves your pockets empty and your spirit crushed. There's a nagging sense of injustice when you see others gliding towards success with ease, without grinding their teeth or losing their hair. You start to think the game is rigged. But what if the secret isn't about working, but about identifying the invisible anchor you've been dragging behind you? If you're tired of being the hardest worker in the room with the smallest paycheck, listen up. There is a fundamental shift in perspective that separates those who struggle from those who soar. A secret that Thomas, a man of infinite sweat, was about to learn the hard way through a devastating encounter in the forest. Meet Thomas. He was the kind of man who viewed a sunrise as a late start to the day. By 4 a.m., he was already deep in the woods, his breath visible in the freezing morning air. He didn't just work. He attacked the forest with a desperate, unyielding kind of ferocity. To Thomas, every drop of sweat was a badge of honor he wore with stubborn, quiet pride. But he didn't realize that each drop of sweat was also a heavy stone he was adding to a backpack that was already overflowing. His hands told a story of brutal labor, covered in thick calluses and permanent dark stain. He took a weird kind of satisfaction in the way his muscles screamed by noon every single day. "Rest is for the weak," he'd mutter, swinging his heavy axe with a rhythmic, bone-jarring thud. In his mind, if he wasn't physically exhausted, he simply wasn't trying hard enough to succeed. He believed in a simple math. More hours equals more wood, and more wood equals prosperity. Thomas was the ultimate grinder, the guy who would rather run through a wall than look for a door. He looked down on anyone who took a breather, convinced his sheer willpower would force the universe to pay him his due. But here's the kicker. His pile of logs never grew as fast as his mounting fatigue because he was too busy being busy to notice the invisible weight crushing his efficiency. He was swinging harder and harder, but the wood was winning. What Thomas didn't know, and what you might be missing too, is that someone nearby was playing a completely different game. A game where the results were tripled with half the effort. And the secret behind it is something most hard workers refuse to see until it's too late. Enter Richard, the neighbor who lived just a stone's throw away from Thomas's frantic workspace. While Thomas was gasping for air, Richard would stroll out with a whistling tune well after breakfast. He'd take long, leisurely lunches, occasionally leaning back to just watch the clouds roll by his porch. To any observer, it looked like Richard was treating the workday like a casual Sunday afternoon picnic. But here is where things get really weird. And honestly, A little bit frustrating for anyone who believes in the grind. Despite his frequent breaks and late starts, Richard's woodpile was a literal mountain compared to Thomas's. His house was freshly painted, his family was well fed, and he never seemed to break a single sweat. The man was operating with a level of calm that made Thomas's frantic grind look like a chaotic mess. How on earth is this guy doing half the work but getting triple the actual results? It feels like Richard found some sort of glitch in the natural laws of labor. While Thomas was banking on brute force, Richard was leaning on a secret type of leverage, a way of moving through life without the heavy burden of trying too hard. Thomas watched from the shadow, his heart heavy with resentment and burning curiosity. He saw the ease in Richard's movements, the way the wood seemed to practically split itself apart for. But the real mystery isn't just how Richard works. It's what he refuses to carry. There is a specific mental weight that Richard dropped years ago, and until you learn to drop it too, your woodpile will always stay small. But a massive storm is brewing on the horizon, and it's about to prove that Thomas's hard work might actually be his death sentence. A massive winter storm is barreling toward the valley, and the demand for firewood skyrockets overnight. For Thomas, this is the moment he's been waiting for, the chance to finally outwork everyone and secure his fortune. He doubles down on his more is better strategy, deciding that sleep is now his greatest enemy. He starts pulling 20-hour shifts, fueled by pure adrenaline and a stubborn, misplaced sense of duty. But the human body is not a machine, and Thomas is about to learn that carrying the weight of a flawed strategy is like carrying a mountain of stones into a hurricane. Soon, the law of diminishing returns begins to rear its head. His once powerful swings become shaky and imprecise, glancing off the wood instead of biting deep. He's working 3 times harder just to produce a fraction of his usual output. And then, the inevitable happens. His dull, abused axe blade hits a knot, and a large chunk of steel chips away. Thomas stands there, staring at the useless tool in his trembling, blistered hands, completely and utterly spent. The grind had finally ground him down to nothing, leaving him broken in the mud while the rain began to fall. He was so focused on the how much that he completely ignored the how. He realized in the most painful way possible that more effort on a flawed system just accelerates the failure. He looked over at the village, knowing he had failed despite his heroic effort. But as he sinks into despair, he hears a steady, rhythmic sound coming from Richard's yard, a sound that shouldn't be possible given the circumstances. What Richard was doing in the middle of the storm was the final piece of the puzzle Thomas was missing, and it's the same piece you need to stop your own collapse. Thomas watches as Richard effortlessly stacks his final log, looking as fresh as a morning daisy. The contrast is almost comical. One man looks like he survived a war, the other a light stroll. Stubbornness is a heavy weight, and Thomas has been carrying a mountain of a year. But even the most prideful heart can only take so much defeat before it starts looking for an exit. He drops his jagged, useless axe into the dirt, the sound echoing his own inner collapse, realizing that the sweat equity he banked on has left him emotionally and physically bankrupt. It's a moment many of us face, realizing our best just isn't cutting it in a world that values results over exhaustion. Thomas swallows the bitter lump in his throat, finally ready to admit that he doesn't have the answers. He limps across the property line, his pride trailing behind him like a tattered old cloak. Richard looks up with a kind smile, not a trace of the arrogance Thomas expected. "I've watched you outwork the sun every day," Thomas rasps, his voice cracking from the strain. "I've given my blood to this forest, so why am I empty-handed while you have more than enough?" It's the question that keeps every burnt-out soul awake at 3 a.m. If hard work is the key, why are the hardest workers often left outside the gates? Richard doesn't offer a lecture on grit or more grinding. Instead, he simply points toward a tool resting against his fence, gleaming in the dim light. And in that single object lies a secret about leverage that will either save your life or let you continue burning out until there's nothing left. A secret we are about to reveal. Richard reaches down and picks up his axe, and the metal catches the light like a polished mirror. Unlike Thomas's chipped and blackened blade, this one looks like it belongs in a master's gallery. It is terrifyingly sharp, capable of slicing through the air with a faint, lethal whistle. Thomas stares at, realizing his own tool was less of an axe and more of a blunt, heavy hammer. You see, Thomas, you think stopping to sharpen the blade is a waste of your precious time, Richard says. But I spend 2 hours every single morning making sure this edge is absolutely, perfectly prepared. While you're out here bruising the trees with blunt force, Richard is letting the physics of the tool do the heavy lift. It's funny how we often mistake being busy for being productive, even when we're just spinning our wheel, because his tool is prepared. Richard's single strike does the work of 10 of Thomas's desperate, shaky swing. That's the beauty of leverage. It turns a modest amount of effort into a massive, undeniable result. But here is the secret. Richard only whispers to those ready to listen. Your blade isn't just a piece of steel. It's your ability to stop carrying the dull, heavy weights of other people's problems that ruin your focus. Thomas finally sees that his exhaustion wasn't a sign of dedication, but a symptom of inefficiency. However, sharpening the blade is only the first step. There are 3 hidden laws of true leverage that Richard uses to stay wealthy while barely working. Laws that most people ignore until they are completely broken. And the second law is the one that truly separates the masters from the slave. To stop being a Thomas and start being a Richard, you must master the 3 pillars of the 1%. First, you've got to stop winging it and start building a system. A system is like a well-oiled machine that keeps humming along even when you aren't manually cranking. Why carry heavy buckets of water when you can just turn a valve? But a system only works if it isn't clogged by the emotional debris of other people's demand, a weight that most high achievers don't even realize they're carrying. Next up is mastery, which is the art of knowing exactly where to strike for the biggest win. You don't just swing at every random tree, you find the ones with high value. In your world, this is using focus as a superpower to ignore the 80% of busy work that yields 0 real-world results. Then there's the pillar that most hustlers hate to hear: strategic rest. A tired arm can't swing a sharp axe with precision, and a fried brain can't make winning moves. Rest isn't about being lazy, it's about making sure that when you step into the arena, you're lethal. These 3 pillars, systems, mastery, and rest, are the DNA of those who have it all. However, even with the best system and the sharpest axe, there is one silent killer of productivity that can still leave you bankrupt and burnt out. It's the hidden reason why Thomas was still struggling, even when he tried to be smart. To see how Thomas finally conquered this last obstacle, we have to look at the radical change he made the very next morning. A move so simple yet so difficult for most people to execute. The next morning, Thomas didn't rush into the dark forest with panicked energy. Instead, he sat by the fire, methodically running a whetstone along the edge of his new blade. He finally realized that an hour spent in preparation saved him 4 hours of backbreaking, fruitless labor. It felt strange to be still, but for the first time, he felt like he was actually in control. But Thomas went even deeper. He began to realize that his old exhaustion wasn't just coming from the wood, but from the invisible emotional stones he had been carrying for the whole village. He spent the afternoon rigging a simple pulley system with some old rope. Now, instead of dragging logs until his spine felt like it might snap, he let basic physics do the heavy lifting. When the sun began to dip, Thomas did something truly radical. He put down his tools at 6 p.m. sharp and walked back to his cottage for a real dinner. He wasn't collapsing in misery, he was intentionally cooling down his mental engine. By choosing to rest, he was ensuring that tomorrow's version of him would be a lethal precision instrument. The neighbors started to whisper, wondering why the village workhorse had suddenly slowed his pace. They couldn't see the shift from blind labor to calculated strategic action. Thomas was no longer just a man with an axe. He was becoming the architect of his own freedom. But the neighbors' whispers were about to turn into gasps of shock, because what Thomas produced in the next 30 days was not just a woodpile. It was a miracle that redefined is possible when you stop carrying what isn't yours. Within a month, the transformation in Thomas's life was nothing short of a total miracle. His woodpile wasn't just matching Richard's anymore. It was starting to tower over the entire village square. The same villagers who used to pity his struggle were now lining up, begging for his secret recipe for success. It turns out that a 40% increase in output is easy when you stop fighting the wood and start using logic. But the most shocking part wasn't the size of his woodpile, it was the look in his eyes. The hollow, haunted gaze of a man drowning in work had been replaced by the quiet confidence of a master who finally set down the stones that were never his to carry. He wasn't limping home anymore, smelling of sweat and despair. Instead, he was walking through his front door while the sun was still high and golden, with more than enough energy to play with his kids and share a laugh with his wife. The injustice of being the broke hard worker had vanished. By using a sharp blade and his new pulley system, he was doing the work of 3 men with half the effort. This is the literal law of leverage in action. It's the unfair advantage that the 1% use every single day to make every second count for 10. Thomas had crossed the bridge from being a laborer to a strategic actor. He looked at his calluses, now fading into smooth skin, and smiled at the sheer absurdity of his old burdened ways. But as Thomas stood there, in his moment of triumph, he realized one final chilling truth. Most people will never experience this peace because they are addicted to the weight of their own struggle. Are you ready to hear the final lesson that allows you to drop your burden forever? Or will you stay trapped in the grind until you break? The answer lies in a single decision you are about to make right now. Your axe isn't a piece of steel in some far-off forest. It's the gray matter sitting right between your ears. Maybe your blunt tool is that messy inbox, the manual tasks you're still doing by hand, or a business strategy that belongs in the past decade. If you're too busy driving to stop for gas, you're eventually going to end up stranded on the shoulder. It's a bit funny how we run ourselves ragged thinking we're winning, while we're actually just slowing down and carrying weights that were never ours to begin with. Working hard is a virtue, but working blind is just a fast track to a massive, soul-crushing burnout. You've got to start asking yourself, is this daily task a sharp blade or just a heavy, blunt instrument? Leverage is the hidden bridge that lets you skip the unnecessary struggle and head straight for the goal. The ultra-successful aren't working 25 hours a day. They're just using much bigger, sharper levers. It's time to stop wearing your exhaustion like a badge of honor and start wearing your actual results instead. You already have the grit. Now you just need the edge to make that grit pay off in a big, life-changing way. But before you go and try to sharpen your strategy alone, you need to understand one thing. There is a specific set of invisible stones you are carrying right now that will blunt even the sharpest new tool you try to build. If you don't learn how to identify and drop them first, you'll just be a faster version of the same exhausted man. I'm about to show you the exact blueprint that helped Thomas and can help you drop those stones forever and finally claim the success you've already worked hard enough to earn. It's time to lay down that blunt, notched blade you've been swinging with such desperate, misguided pride. You've seen the proof today. Sheer force is a fool's game when precision is an option sitting right on the table. Stop celebrating your exhaustion and start demanding results that actually match your true potential. But let's be honest. You can't sharpen your strategy if your hands are too full of everyone else's stone to even pick up the whetstone. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day, the constant busyness you use as a shield to hide from the fact that you're stuck on a treadmill. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created a guide to help you find the same exit Thomas found. I'm talking about my ebook, The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours. This isn't just a book. It's the lever you've been missing to move the mountains of your life. Inside, I show you exactly how to trade your sweat for system and your burnout for breakthroughs. And because I know that sharpening the blade requires more than one tool, I've included 2 powerful bonuses when you grab it today. Bonus 1. Learning to let go the practical manual to stop dragging the logs of the past into your future. Bonus 2. When saying no is an act of self-love. The secret to building the fences Richard had, so you can protect your energy and focus only on what brings you prosperity. If you don't take this step today, you are choosing to stay in the mud with a broken tool, watching the storm roll in. Don't let your grit be the reason you fail. It's time to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Click it now, drop the stones that aren't yours, and finally start your own chapter of strategic success.